All right, let's talk about repair and troubleshooting. I start from the right. This is actually not for repair or troubleshooting primarily. This is like the tool. I always have that with me. You can basically just put the battery in there, and it shows you like the voltage on the battery left, and that's really good. Like if you're in the field, you want to make sure that you start flying with a full battery. Just put it inside. It shows you the voltage, and you're ready to go. Again, full battery, 25 volts. Empty battery, 21 volts. If you go with 4S, full battery, 16.8 volts, and empty battery is everything below 14 volts. That's the thing. Or if you want to have per cell, it's 4.2 volts is full and 3.5 is empty. Storage is 3.8. That's the first tool. Then another thing, we call that a smoke stopper. That's really important. So sometimes when you build a quad and you plug in the battery, it might be that you connected one of the cables not correctly, or electronic parts are touching, or it can be you crashed like on the ground and the flight controller and the ESC moved or something in there, and then like you could basically break something. So what you do is you take that smoke stopper and you put it basically in there in between, and then you plug in the battery, and when that thing is like lining up or like start making a sound, you know, okay, something is not good on the quad. Just cost $10, but it's going to save you a lot of times like some other technical parts or components. Very helpful. That thing, I also use that when I build my quads, but also when I have to repair it. Super useful. I don't know the English name, but basically what you have to do when you're soldering and you wouldn't take the soldering metal iron away, it's really hard. So what you do is you basically load it, you basically make the metal like liquid, and then you basically suck it in with this thing. It really helps, and when you can basically spit the metal out again. Extremely useful. I use that all the times when I repair and when I build my quads. You should definitely get one of these. Then the next thing is, that's a super fancy thing. I just discovered that lately on the internet. It's basically the entire beta flight on there. So what you do is you can also plug that in your flight controller, and then you can basically power it up with a 1 to 6S battery. Just plug it in, and this thing has Bluetooth. And then on your mobile phone, you have like this app for that thing. It's called SpeedyB. It's basically beta flight over Bluetooth. So you can basically do, when you like in the field and you need to do some quick adjustment, you just can plug that in. You can make some changes in beta flight directly. Let's say you want to change some rates, some pits. You can do that with that directly, and you don't need to bring a cable and a laptop to the field. Extremely helpful. I don't know the exact price, but I'm happy to put it in the description as well. This thing is super helpful. It combines all the most important screwdrivers and the thing to loose the props. I mean, if you look at the size, that's like basically already integrated in one of these with like a factor of the size. That's really nice. Still, I use these ones when I mount like my GoPro to one of these like universal mounts. I use this one, but otherwise I just take this one to the field, and you basically can easily fix it or like change the things and do some like repairs on the drone. All right, let's talk about some issues on the drone. Always when you crash, check the props. If a prop is bended down, you're not going to see it, but it starts wobbling, shaking, and because it's like because the prop is bended down, you're going to shuffle like more air. It's not like symmetric anymore. So you're going to have way more like pressure on the motor, and you can easily get a hot motor, or you can freak out the ESC if a prop is not bended. So always, if you crash, check out that these things are on the same level, that none of these blades are like bended down. Otherwise, you have to bend it up back. Make sure that the screws, you always on a regular basis have to make the screws tight. That's also important if you have loose screws. it could be that, yeah, basically that you see some vibrations. Also important is, because there are so many different frames and they have different sizes, maybe the stock screws, they don't work and you have to deal with other screws. Make sure that when you basically make the motor fit to that to the frame, that the screw is not touching one of the wires. I've seen that before, because if one of the screws is touching one of these wires, then the electricity is going through into the frame, and it can lead to vibration, or yeah, like you can burn a motor. It's just not good. Then when you basically crashed really bad and you start spinning the motor and you can hear the bearing and it sounds not good. I mean, there's like an okay sound of a bearing, but there's like it's loose and you can hear the bearing. You might want to consider to just change this particular motor. That's very important. Another thing is when you play with the tunes and when you play with the props, you always, when you fly, have to land and check how hot is the motor. That's so important for tuning. So you make some changes in Betaflight. For example, you move the slider for filtering to the right, you land the quad, you feel it. If it's too hot, you have to change it. Or if it's still cool, you go a little bit more and more. And if you touch the motor and you cannot hold it for a decent couple of minutes, like 10 seconds, and you going basically away because it's so hot, the motor is too warm, and if you then have a band of props, it's going to burn for sure. So you want to make sure that the motor is like nicely warm, but too much. Another thing is always have like an antenna attached to the parts. Otherwise, you can like also burn a device. That's also important. The next thing is, if you start your quad, like I said, and it does like this, zoop, and it starts flipping, it's mostly, I've seen in 100% of my cases, it was a configuration issues. It was either that my motor directions were not set up correctly, so I had to go in Betaflight and say, oh, okay, the motor assignment was not like in the X shape, it was not correct, so I had to change that. Or my flight controller was not nicely laid out, so when I looked at the graphing and I did the movement, I could see that it's not basically like what I'm doing with the drone. So the image was doing something else. For example, if I went back with my drone, I could see that the image is like going to the front. So I knew, okay, I have to make some readjustment there. And the last but not least, it can be that accidentally in the rush, you put the blades in the wrong direction, and that's because it starts jumping. Or you did everything correctly, but in the configuration tab where you have the X, you have to basically select if the props are going outwards or if they're going all inwards. So basically that also plays account when it starts like flipping. Then another thing is what I have like seen, make sure that when you combine flight controller and ESC from different brands, that you really choose the VBAT input for the flight controller and not the 5 volt, because if you use the 5 volt and you go with full power of the battery on that 5 volt, you're going to destroy all the technical components basically in that circle. That's definitely what I have experienced. It can also be that your Betaflight crashes and you basically can't, like the settings are wrong or it just doesn't work. Or for example, it could be that a crossfire stays in like a binding mode. Sometimes it helped me also to basically just flash it again, do a clean install, and that really worked out. What could be is if you have an issue and your crossfire gets destroyed, it can be that it stays in the binding mode, or you can bind it, but once you dispower it and put it back in, it's basically disconnected again. So that could also be a reason why you destroyed it. If you crash in the water, if you crash and you smell, usually if you smell something, it's not really good. And especially if you go in water, it could be that everything looks nice, but once you put the plug basically the battery back in, you hear like you see a little bit of smoke going up, but you could see and you could also hear that there's like electronic stuff going on, so you know that you probably smoked the electronic speed controller, so the ESC. Mostly I've seen when I crashed in water, if I did bad crash, my flight controller was always okay, but my ESC I had to replace. That's basically from my learning. The next thing is like with the batteries troubleshooting, I would say if you don't treat the batteries the way they are, you're going to either burn them or they're going to blow up. So if you charge them fully and you leave it 6 weeks or a couple of months, they're going to start blowing up. The same if you have them completely empty. Ja, fuck. Ich bin einfach am Überlegen. Ah ja. Another thing is, what I have seen is, make sure that when you do some like configurations on the air unit, or like if you update something on the air unit, that you also update your goggles and that you also update your DJI controller if you have it. You have to basically update each of the 3 to have it like fully working. If you're in a European country, you know that 25 milliwatts is like a rule, and also if you basically configure the unit from that country, you're going to have it limited to 25 milliwatts. There are some tutorials out there to if you switch location and you go to a country or to a place where you can fly, you can basically change this output power. So you can like basically increase the output power from 25 up to 700 or even 1200 milliwatts, which of course gives you more range. But you should consider that this then is like maybe not like legally fully correct or legally correct, because you're using more output power than you should do. And for example, also with the channels and the DJI goggles, you have per default 4 channels. And if you do like, if you're for example from a different country like the States, you're gonna have 8 channels. But yeah, if you're in a European country, maybe with 8 channels, that would be not legally correct. So you have to make sure. But there is an option like to change this country-based code. And there are also some nice tutorials out there who explain you how to do it, what is very easy like to do.